Well, hey there YouTube, welcome back to the channel. I'm Adam, thanks for hanging out with me again today. And on today's video, we're going to take a look at the Marui Super Wheelie, the Toyota Land Cruiser. Now, if you guys haven't seen the video, click here real quick and go back and see the video where I kind of showcased all these real quickly. These are all gifts from the RC Elf, and RC Elf, thank you so much again. These are absolutely amazing kits. And I kind of have figured out now the direction that most of the kits are going with. So I'm not going to get into all of them, but for this one is staying new in box. It is just too rare, too cool to have one that is still preserved in the box, and I just can't, bring myself to building it. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to kind of show you around, take some pictures of the box, and then we're actually going to dive in and go through the parts trees just so everybody can see kind of what is in the kit, see similarities to other kits and everything. But before I get into that, I do want to kind of, show you and tell you a little bit about it. So I've got my cheat sheets here that I'm going to be referring to. So if you keep looking down, just ignore me and look at the box. So Marui was not into RC for very long. This kit came out in 1983, and this was the first kit on their lineup. They had quite a few different cars, and I'll run through them real quick. So the first kit was the Super Wheelie Toyota Land Cruiser. The second kit also came out in 1983, was a Super Wheelie CJ7 Golden Eagle. And then in 84, they released the Marui Hunter. In somewhere 84, 85, they released the Big Bear. In 85, they released the Galaxy and the Galaxy RS. Again in 85, they released the CJ7 Golden Eagle and the Toyota Land Cruiser again. The Samurai came out in 86. The Ninja came out in 87. They had a Coors Thunderbird that came out in 88, and then the Shogun in 1988 as well. I believe there was a Mitsubishi I can't say that word. Mitsubishi Pajero that also came out, but I couldn't really find much information on that. Being a kit from 83, this has the mechanical speed control and all of that stuff in it. This was long before, mechanical speed controls were commonplace or even affordable. At that point, it was all mechanical speed controls. So this was their first release. Now, Marui also had their hands in a ton of other things, and they're still in business today. The funny thing is recently I had a friend come over, and the minute he saw this logo on the box, he was like, dude, I know that logo. I used to get airsoft guns from them, and he still gets parts from them. So Marui is still in business. They're just not making RC anymore. They moved on to airsoft. But back in the 80s and 90s, their catalogs were huge, and they had everything from RC cars to replica pistols, airsoft type stuff, paintball stuff, lighters, all kinds of crazy things. They just kind of made and manufactured a lot of different things, and RC was kind of their brief period of about 6-7 years that they were releasing cars, and then they just decided that evidently the RC market wasn't for them and moved on. So in this kit, especially in the Super Wheelies, you'll see some similarities between Tamiya kits and these kits. They borrowed some ideas from them. The overall kind of design of it, the roll cage, the kind of layout, especially the front bumper. The front bumper is almost a complete ripoff of Tamiya. The roll cage is pretty much identical. The way the driver figure sits in there, there's a lot of similarities to Tamiya and this. But, they made it their own, and companies have been doing that for decades, taking styling cues and design ideas and stuff and, making it their own. It was kind of that golden era of RC, and they did take a lot of cues from Tamiya, but, Tamiya was not the only one that made wheelie models. Marui made the wheelie models as well, and Kyosho actually made some also. Kyoshos were more of an on-road type thing, and were not anywhere near as popular as these off-road ones were. But, you know, again, this one borrowed a ton of influence and design cues from the Wild Willy release. So I'm going to kind of wrap up the little brief history lesson on this. You know, unfortunately, I was not able to get a vast bit of information on this. You know, all the forums and stuff that I went to and all the articles I went to, you know, all either seemed to repeat the identical information or were just talking about the models in general and looking for parts and here's my restored one and all this stuff, and didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge to be dropped. So, you know, I'm not an expert in this. You know, these kits are all new to me, so I'm just trying to pass on as much as I can from what I learned of it. But once we get down into the box, you'll see kind of some of the similarities and, you know, things that were borrowed from Tamiya when they made this. So I'm going to get this opened up. We'll come down and start going through it. All right, guys, I think I got you positioned well enough to where you can see in the box clearly and we can go through everything. So starting with the manual, you will see in the manual, it is laid out very similarly to Tamiya's. Instead of having all the parts down the side, they have all the parts at the top, and then they have the steps below. So it's very similar. They just changed it up the way they do it, and they condensed it a little bit more than Tamiya does. Normally Tamiya will have them blocked out in very specific sections in order to, you know, make it very clear these parts go to this. This one, they kind of lay out everything at the top of the page for the steps and then move down to the individual parts and pieces or individual steps using those parts. But again, you know, the winch for the front end, you know, the way the dash goes in, the driver figure, you know, this roll cage, you know, is all very, very, very similar to the Wild Willy, you know, even coming down to the spare tire cover and the fuel canister on the back of it. So it's very, very, very similar. And then again, at the end, they have your parts tree layouts, similar to the Tamiya manuals as well. And then all the included hardware. So it gives you counts and everything of the sizes. So very similar design to Tamiya's manuals, just changed up a little bit to be their own. Now we get into the actual presentation, and here you can see we do have some blister packs and, you know, similar color coding to Tamiya. Tires are already mounted to the wheels, and they're very cool, kind of heavy, chunky, knobby tires. You got all your parts trees, your chassis, your motor, and all that stuff over here. And then, of course, the very nicely molded detailed body. Now the body on this one does differ from Tamiya's. So on the Wild Willy, you basically have a big raised fuel cell and a sunk in kind of bed area, to where on this one, the bed area is actually raised and you have two lay down jerry cans and then a fuel cell. So obviously they were expecting this one to go 1,000,000 miles because you have a built-in fuel cell, two jerry cans here, a jerry can that mounts to the back. So either this thing only got about 1 mile per gallon gas mileage, or they expected it to go all the way across the world without having to stop for fuel. Now you can see, now you can see this guy has been in the box for quite a while, so the blue from the actual inside of the box has rubbed off onto the plastics. So this has been, you know, hanging out for quite a while. So that is your chassis, motor, and these are stapled in, so I'm not going to pull them out. But the motor is a sealed end bell, black end bell motor, very similar to Tamiya's. The only difference is this actually has unsoldered leads on it. So you would have to actually do the soldering to the speed control wiring, where all of Tamiya's kits had the bullet connectors on there, so you didn't have to do any soldering. But this guy is unsoldered and just has bare wire exposed, so you would actually have to do some soldering in the build of this kit. Now your chassis tub is similar to the Wild Willys. Now I don't have an original Willy chassis, but I believe they're very similar. It's very similar to the Wild Willy 2 chassis. Just a tub chassis, battery compartment back here, all your electronics and servos and all go down in here. And I believe your steering servo mounts up front, but your bumper would mount to here, and then you would have your kind of pin through suspension kind of floating up through these holes in the chassis. So sorry about the glare, but again, all this packaging is factory stapled, I believe, into here. So I'm just going to kind of look through them and fold them out of the way. So here you have kind of the swinging suspension arms, motor mounts, some of the interior pieces like the shifter knob, your antenna tube, and some of the other suspension bits, your steering knuckles, which they have a really long steering arm on them. So I expect those possibly broke fairly often back in the day. Your driver guy. Okay, so these were kind of already unstapled, so we will take a look at this. So your driver figure up top it's just like the Wild Willy. So you have the two-piece body, the two-piece arms, the two-piece head, and the front of his head is actually back here. It's come loose. But still has kind of that, Wild Willy look to it, but not quite as aggressive and angry looking as Willy is. Same big front bumper style. The winch has popped off and is floating around in here, but the winch is fairly identical to the Wild Willy 2. You have your transmission halves, you've got your spare tire cover, you've got the jerry can for the rear, and then you have all the roll bar pieces kind of smushed in between those two. Now I'm not going to open the plastic up. The plastic is still stapled, so I'm going to leave that stapled. So buried up underneath here, you have the wheels, and then you have some of the lights for the roll bar. You have your molded dash, which actually has gauges and dials and stuff molded into it. Looks to be a cool little CB radio molded in there as well, so that's pretty cool. I like that. You had the windshield frame and just some other random bits and pieces. And then buried up underneath, again, we have more hardware. We have the hardware to put the kit together, which is not a lot. It is a fairly small bag of screws. So buried up underneath of here was the screw kits. So you have the little Super Wheelie logos on there, and then the screws in there. And I'm assuming these are broken up kind of as Tamiya would into certain steps. And then you have the big suspension pins and rubber bands that have not been rubbery for quite a while. So in that bottom one, and sorry for the glares guys, but you have more hardware in there that is going to be for your rest of your assembly, wheel nuts, some of the suspension screw pins. You have your gear sets in here for the differential and the little counter gear. Your pinion gear is in there. In here you have your mechanical speed control. So I believe this is one that mounts to the top of the servo. So your servo will sit down the chassis and your speed control dial sits right on top of it. So it's not a linked one like Tamiya's are. And then you have your springs for both the front bumper and your shocks. And then of course your wheels and tires. So that's pretty much everything in the kit. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed kind of the quick walkthrough of what's in the box. Again, I tried getting as much information as I could, but unfortunately there's not a wealth of information out there written on the internet. I am sure there's tons of people out there that are way more knowledgeable than I am about these, but everything I could find was, like I said, just kind of regurgitated information over and over again from article to article about kind of Marui and their stint in RC game. And then, a million posts of, here's my restored this, here's my restored that, kind of those type of forum things. But not a whole lot of, nitty gritty details about the models themselves, where they came from, any controversies or anything like that. I didn't really find a whole lot. But, I think this is an awesome, cool little piece of the past. It's really neat to have something, again, like I said, new in box, that is from a smaller manufacturer that, wasn't Tamiya, it wasn't Kyosho, that wasn't pumping out, hundreds of thousands of kits all the time. So, having something that's a little bit more rare, I had to make the difficult decision to just leave it in the box and leave it as close to box perfect as I could. Now, I was happy that I was able to get those other parts trees out and, take a look at them and all. Everything looks to be accounted for in here and looks to be good to go. So if I ever do decide to put it together, Everything here is here and ready to go. For right now, this one's just going to sit in here in the box. I'm going to be able to enjoy it, take it out, look at the internals of it, and just kind of oogle over it. You know, if I want to drive something like this, we'll take this guy out. You know, it's not the Marui, but same general principle. You know, it's a little cool little Jeep, very close to the same size. The biggest difference is the Wild Willy's head is way bigger. The body's about the same size, but Willie's head is way bigger. They made it cartoonish, which is kind of cool, and it makes them a whole lot easier to paint. But like I said, you can see on here, the second seat is not in here as it is in here. And in the back, you just have the single fuel cell versus, you know, all the different fuel cans. But overall, you can see there's a lot of similarity between this and this guy. So obviously this is much more like the original Willys Wheeler that had the trailing arm rear suspension versus the independent rear suspension that this guy is. But again, driving it, I can get my laughs and giggles by watching this guy drive around. And for pure nostalgia, you know, we can come in here, open this kit up, show it off to people, and just be able to enjoy, you know, a piece of history in the box. Anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I always love chatting with you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we've got 2 more coming. We have the Mugen Bulldog 2, and then we have the Cox Bandito as well. Everybody out there, you guys be happy, be healthy, be safe, and I will catch you on the next one. See you.